What a wonderful thing is our church. This whole network is built on trust. The essence of evangelization is to tell everybody Jesus loves you. We are all called to be great saints. Don't miss the opportunity. Well, first I want to thank you. You gave all of our sisters and myself great courage, and we thank you for that. There were 15,000 calls last night, and we appreciated that, and a few more thousand today, an email, and one sweet letter came today, an email, and it said, I'm one of your liberal sisters. And I think you're doing a great job, but most of all, I feel the church, the new church, is a temple, and that made us feel good. Because with all our liberals and all my teasings, I do love you, and we love each other. We just think different, but that doesn't matter. If we only love those who think like we do, we wouldn't love many people. Would we? So I do thank all of you for doing that, and it lifted up our courage, because we will always want to do the right thing before God. That's it, what's important. But also, we wanted to benefit the people. My guest this evening has been mentioned by many of our viewers as a candidate. You know, I get all kind of letters, and some I follow, and one I followed one time was not very good. He was good. I think if he was able to say anything, it would have been good. But he froze in that chair. And even his perspiration, I shook hands with him, it was ice cold. And I thought, oh, we're going to have a problem tonight. And we did. But he's just such a sweet brother that I don't know what happened to him. But tonight we have one. Doesn't look like he's scared at all. My guest is a Capuchin Franciscan friar, and is very active in missionary work. And they're always interesting because they go out in jungles and hard work. And he's been there for many years, and he's currently director of missions and retreats. And only someone who has lived it hard, I think, can give a really good retreat. So please welcome, would you believe it, Father Angelus Shaughnessy. Shaughnessy, right?
Thank you, Mother.
You're not the only member of your family who became religious, are you?
No, Mother, there are two others. Father Sigmund, Capuchin Franciscan.
Wow.
He was a missionary in Puerto Rico for 34 years. He died 5.5 years ago, one day short of his 71st birthday. And then my Sister Cecilia, she taught for 52 years, and music on the side, but she's retired now too.
Isn't that awesome? How long have you been a priest?
45 years this coming June.
I won't even ask how old you are. I could figure it out, though. You know, you've been in the mission so long. What was the thing you learned the most? What affected you the most, being a missionary?
See, I was in Papua New Guinea for 14 years, among some of the most primitive people in the world. I think the biggest thing I learned was a great appreciation for my Capuchin Franciscan brothers, because I've never seen religious life lived better than there. There may be places where it is lived better, but I never saw it better than there. We really needed each other. We had wonderful support from our superiors and our own bishop there too. That was a great blessing. I suppose that would be the blessing in the supernatural order, or maybe the natural order too, but in the purely natural order, I learned flexibility. Because if you stand in there rigid on any issue except that which would compromise the faith and our traditional morality. I think you're headed for trouble in a very primitive setting like that. The old expression we use near Pittsburgh, where we're from, is there are many ways to skin the cat. I don't know if they use that down in Canton, Ohio or not.
Yeah.
But there are many ways to do different things, and you learn them from the primitive people in Papua New Guinea.
Well, they're different. I mean, they don't have probably 1/10 of, or less than which you ordinarily are accustomed to.
Oh, not just 1/10, like 1,000th of what we have. The wealthiest person in Papua New Guinea would be among the poorest in the United States of America. Poverty is relative. But it was a great experience there, and I think they're just as intelligent as anybody in this country. Some of the boys in the seminary where I was teaching for the first 11 years I was there knew 5 and 6 different languages. There was one little fellow named Paulus Ombong from near Indonesia. He knew 12 languages. Unbelievable.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And they could learn the higher mathematics too, even into calculus. You'd never believe it for the primitive conditions that they came from. So we went over there to help establish the native clergy, and they have many native priests and several native bishops now too. And the Capuchin order is established there too. We're very happy about that.
Did you go in the jungles, or how did you maintain your own faith, your own love, and your own zeal when you saw so much of the same, the poverty, whatever, day after day, day after day? What did you buckle? What gave you that? Of course, it had to be our Lord, I know, but what gave you that zeal?
For me, it's always personally been the Blessed Sacrament.
Yeah.
Making a holy hour every day. But the brothers too, they're the real sacramentals around us. When you see them in action, they're most uplifting.
What they do?
They pray. They live the faith. Many of them very self-effacing people too, and hard workers. Unbelievable. They work with their hands, as St. Francis told us to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were good at that. But I was in the seminary 11 years. The conditions weren't too pristine there on the coast, but then I went into the mountains for 3 years too. There it was very, very primitive. And you were speeding if you would go along those roads more than 5 or 6 miles an hour. And you'd better be ready to stop too to repair the bridges, because often the planking would fold up on you like an accordion. So you'd have to have these big 6-inch spikes to nail the decking down, so you wouldn't have to land on the bearers that straddle the water below. Yeah, we did a lot of praying too.
I bet you did in the middle of that.
It was a good experience.
And the people you reached where were they? In the jungles? What did you do when you got to these different tribes?
Well, the big link with us, with the people, right through were the catechists. These people were from among their own, who knew their local languages, and there are 700 languages in the country. 700, not just dialects, languages, very distinct. But they knew their own language, and they knew Neo-Melanesian, which is Pidgin English. And we could learn that quickly in about 6 months, so that was the great betweener with the catechists and they with the people. Some of us worked pretty hard in the native languages too, but you can spend all your time doing that. That was a real effort. So when people come to this country and kind of have a rough time with English, don't be rough on them, be gentle, because we felt like infants over there among their own, using their local languages.
You're giving retreats now, right?
Right.
How important is a retreat to the average parish or the average group of people who have to live in the world, and they have to struggle and fight the good fight constantly? What merit or good is a retreat when they're here, they're in church, they're all enthused, and all of a sudden, boom, they're thrown back to where they were?
That is a problem too, I know. But we hear the scriptures, come apart and rest a while, as Jesus did, to really recoup your strength and rekindle your enthusiasm and your inspiration and your motivation too. Kind of to deepen your soul, that sort of thing. It is definitely a grace for them. And they always seem to leave the retreat with a high, and I just thought it was kind of the effervescence of the emotionalism of the moment. But I think it's deeper than that. Mm-hmm. I think there in that atmosphere of prayer, living under the same roof with the Blessed Sacrament, they experience the love of the Lord. And once you feel that you're loved, there's no end to the generosity that you're capable of. But it is kind of a rude awakening sometimes when they have to get back to situations that are difficult. But then the grace is there maybe to carry those crosses too a lot better than they had before. So I would recommend the retreat as it's really legislated for us in religious life and in the priesthood once a year anyhow. Mm-hmm. But we have the parish missions too.
Is that different?
It is, because with a retreat you're with one group of people who are pretty much alike, like married couples retreats or priest retreats or sisters retreats, and you can focus in on a lot of issues which are just particular for them. So you have to be just a little bit more generic when it comes to the parish mission. But following the essentials of the faith, like why stay Catholic? Because the biggest group of Christians in the United States of America today are fallen away Catholics. And we hope to invite them into a mission too. And to really stress the belief in the Holy Eucharist. Mm-hmm. That's the stumbling block for everybody now. And to make good use of the sacrament of penance, as our Holy Father Pope John Paul II recommends. He said once a month. I go every 2 weeks.
I go every week. Oh.
Of course, you need it, Mother.
After last night, I knew I needed something.
My confessor is 20 years younger than I am. And the one I had before that was 30 years younger, so they're updated in the theology to keep me on the straight and narrow. But it's a wonderful opportunity to keep that sensitivity to the Lord mm-hmm. and His expectations. Yes. Kind of a sensitivity to sin. The saints always refer to themselves as the greatest of sinners. I didn't understand that until somebody told me that figure of speech about sunlight coming through a window in the morning in a Capuchin Franciscan monastery. You don't see the dust if the light isn't coming through, but when the light is coming through, you see billions of particles, mm-hmm. and that's what the saints did. They let the light of the Lord come through into their lives. So they saw themselves more or less, hopefully, as the Lord would see them. Mm-hmm. They responded to that. And a sensitive conscience is one of the signs of blessed predestination, that we're going to go to heaven, avoiding the extreme of scrupulosity on the one hand and unscrupulosity and callousness on the other. It's a wonderful place, too, to be challenged. Some of us need that, too. A place to be encouraged. Isn't that where a lot of people need support, too? Encouragement. And for many, it's a question, I think, of having things clarified for them.
That's true.
Even though they may know the catechism so well, as that filters through their own conscience, to give it some objectivity, sometimes they need another person right there with them. And a reminder, too, and clearly to get graces that we'll get nowhere else except in the tribunal of God's loving mercy there. Mm-hmm. So we make much of confession, as the Pope wants us to.
Why is it so difficult today, it seems like it is anyway, for people to go to confession?
I think one of the biggest reasons is because a lot of them don't believe anymore in the power of the priesthood. That this power was given by Christ to His church, which is the extension of Himself in the world today. They don't want to accept that. I think it's probably a cover-up and a cop-out to justify their own rationalizations. And of course, we're in a culture now where nobody sins anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, the greatest evil in the world is not sin. The greatest evil in the world is the denial of sin. Because compunction and contrition, sorrow get rid of sin, but the denial of sin perpetuates the sin, and that's what we're coping with today. And the ultimate in sin is to call evil good.
Evil good?
Yes.
Explain it.
Like calling suicide death with dignity.
Oh, yeah.
By calling pornography freedom of speech. By calling homosexual marriages alternate lifestyle. And those who are in favor of abortion now are pro-choice, and their opponents are called anti-choice. That's the word they're using in the papers up around our way there. I think that's the ultimate in sin, and that's the culture that we breathe in every day of our lives. Just read the papers.
Oh, yeah.
But I think in a mission, too, you have to really reach out to those people who are hurting and suffering. And everybody's hit with it one way or another, sooner or later, within themselves because of the debility of their own frame, or death of a loved one in their families, or some great misfortune, raising a handicapped child. Gee, these things are... How do you cope with that? Of course, suffering is a mystery, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We're mysteries, God is mystery, and that whole interaction between ourselves and our God is terribly mysterious. But how do you do it outside the context of the crucified? I think it's impossible. In our beautiful Franciscan tradition, our total focus is Jesus crucified. So we're in a position, if we're trying to live this life, to give this kind of inspiration to our people, to help them carry that cross that they have. We'd like to put some emphasis, too, on love and what that's all about. I think that's the most used, overused, misused, abused, misunderstood word in the English language. Mm-hmm. And for so many people it means lust. But lust can never be love, because lust always wants to manipulate, to control, and to exploit other people for selfish purposes. And once a person knows that they've been used, they hate the person who's treated them that way, and they hate themselves for allowing themselves to be so used. Lust can never be love. And I've yet to meet a lustful person in my whole life, either hemisphere, who was ever happy. Never. Not even a one. Mm-hmm. But the good kinds of love that are outlined in C.S. Lewis's book, The Four Loves, beautiful volume. He gives the Greek words for it, like eros, erotic love, sensual, sexual, physical, romantic, a wonderful gift between spouses in marriage. God's invention, not the invention of Sigmund Freud. And if spouses have enough of this in their marriage, legitimate pleasure, they don't have to look for illegitimate pleasure. And then the love called storge. That's the love for brothers and sisters that we have. Beautiful gift. And then the love of friendship, philia. He uses the Greek words all the time. And of course, the only one that it perjures into eternity, agape. Unconditional, sacrificial, eternal. It's the way God loves us. And of the four loves, that's the only one that perjures into eternity. And that's what our whole life is about. To acknowledge the love of our God and to try to respond in the way that He taught us to. And for our beautiful tradition as Franciscans, through the crib, through the cross, and through the altar.
Do you feel as you go around that we have more what we call fallen away Catholics? And some of them will blame the 60s or early 70s when changes were made. But in your experience, what makes the majority of people who fall away, what makes them go that route?
I'll bet there's many answers to that as there are people, and I don't know if I can generalize, really. Just a general loss of faith and the contentment that comes with a very successful economy. Now, we don't need God anymore. This kind of thinking, that might be part of it. Mm-hmm. I think the loss and the belief in the Holy Eucharist is the key thing, seems to me. I think a lot of people's individual lifestyles, too, and to face the living God. They can't do that with a clean heart, so they'll rationalize their position away rather than to admit that they've been wrong or they've done wrong, to make a good confession. And then there's the example of so many around them too. I don't know of almost any family that I've met in years that hasn't found somebody in their family who's given the faith away. Children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews. It's really pathetic, and some of them went to pretty good schools too.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's one underlying reason that could kind of be representative more than anything else, I think it would be the lack of the faith expression in the home. How many families that you and I know actually pray together in the home? Like before and after meals, a little morning prayer and a little night prayer. And if the faith doesn't get into the marrow of the bones in the home, even if you send them to wonderful Catholic schools and great CCD programs and powerful liturgies, it never really registers with them. I think many, many parents have lost their credibility to teach. If they're practicing contraception, for example, how can they ever teach the value of Christian chastity and modesty? I think they've lost their credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And very subtly, without even making it explicit or articulating that sort of thing. It's family life that really needs a lot of help.
How can we, we're so devoted to the Holy Eucharist here and the other monastery. What can the average person do to enhance the faith in Eucharist and Our Lady? I think they both go together. And help their neighbor to understand what a gift this is from the Father to us.
It's the greatest gift. And not even God himself could have given us any more.
Mm-hmm. That's what's all awesome about it.
Absolutely. If people really believed in that, our churches would be jammed.
Mm-hmm.
But as it is now, what is it? From that Notre Dame study, fewer than 25% actually believe what the church teaches in regard to the Eucharist. So when they have this October count, how many people show up for Mass on Sunday, the national average is around, 20, 21%? I'm not sure. It depends on the place too, I'm sure. What can we do?
Teach the faith. I think that's the biggest thing we can do today.
I think everybody should memorize chapter 6 of St. John's Gospel,
Mm-hmm.
the promise of the Eucharist, verses 51 to 58.
Mm-hmm.
He who eats my flesh, drinks my blood, has everlasting life. And then he comes with a threat. Unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you will not have life in you. For my flesh is real food and my blood is real drink. I think the study of the Scriptures is the big thing. Then the actual institution at the Last Supper. And then St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. This is how the church understood the Eucharist in the first centuries. And for 2,000 years since, straight through, uninterruptedly. My whole youth was surrounded with non-Catholic Christians. My best friend all through my youth was a little Presbyterian by the name of Jimmy Swearingen. He used to come down to confession with us. But he wouldn't go to confession. He'd read all the Catholic pamphlets. That's why he turned out to be a beautiful sports writer with the paper out of Akron, Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Did he ever become Catholic?
No, he didn't. No, he didn't. But he became a very good writer, though. He always did it with washed hands, very clean hands, because we didn't have the 5 or 10 cents to pay for the pamphlets back in the 30s, so you put them back on the shelf after you read them. But our next door neighbors were people of the Methodist Church, the best living people I've ever met. And my brother Paul and I used to manage a playground for the Salvation Army. I used to play football and softball for the First Baptist Church in Rochester, Pennsylvania.
You went around, didn't you?
Yeah, and we used to box at the Episcopal Church too until the Knights of Columbus bought their property. And we always went to the Lutheran strawberry festivals because Lutheran strawberries are always much better than Catholic strawberries. But my problem...
I thought a strawberry was a strawberry. You got Catholic strawberries?
Yeah, well, they could never do them up as well as the Lutherans, so... I guess we were in the spirit of ecumenism way back in the 30s and the 40s.
But I could be ecumenical with strawberries, too.
That'll pull us together. But when I pass a non-Catholic Christian church, even though we really love these people, and we're into this chair of unity octave too, very much so, there's always a certain sadness, though, when they got rid of the priesthood and the Holy Eucharist 400 years ago. Because what is religion without sacrifice? The offering of a victim to Almighty God to acknowledge that He's God and you and I are not God, especially when the sacrifice that they discarded is the sacrifice of the body and blood of the risen Lord. That always saddens me. But I think return to the Scriptures and the study of the Catechism and the example of the parents to bring people to the Eucharist, these are all very vital. Like so many of these youngsters who make First Communion, receive the sacrament of confirmation, within even weeks after they receive those sacraments, may not show up again until they're looking for the next sacrament, like matrimony. And whom do you blame but the parents? Because a lot of these kids can't get to church on their own. They need the transportation. Yeah, I lay it solidly at the feet of the parents. Because they have so many other priorities, like their sports games on Sunday morning. And that takes all precedence over everything else. That's kind of pathetic.
Well, yeah, especially some of the gay... my concept of some of the sports is a little different than anybody else's. Like golf, you hit a ball and then you run after to get it. And after you get it, you hit it again, hoping it's going to be in a hole about this big, a half a mile away, you know. And then the place where you go, with this, some kind of a club, makes it as difficult as possible. They put water and sand dunes, and you pay for all that. I mean, if it was free, you wouldn't mind, you know, but it...
But golf, Mother, is a beautiful lesson in Christian humility.
Oh, it has to be something. I don't know. I'm not a sports person, and I've always wanted to do, you know, people get so excited, they're at the edge of their chair, and this guy finally catches the ball. This is football now. And they run after him like he committed some crime. And they're always running to catch him. Well, wouldn't that be enough? No, they got to pile up that high.
And of course, they're well rewarded for that, Mother, in the professional ranks. They're paid very well.
They do. How does he breathe under there? Does anybody care?
Sometimes he doesn't.
I never engaged in sports, but I would think that it sometimes takes the place of the Lord.
I'm sure it does. And I'm sort of glad the Pittsburgh Steelers did make the playoffs this year.
You're glad?
Yeah, I'll tell you why.
Good. Why?
It's a very supernatural reason, just to show you how holy I am. It's an awful distraction for me when they make the playoffs. You know, thinking, how are they going to pull this off so they can take the next opponent and beat them? But without being in the playoffs, I don't have to be concerned about that now. Everybody knows St. Louis is going to take it all.
That's all too deep for me, you know. I think it's wonderful, you know, to have some pastime. But I was visiting someone years ago, and the men were watching the football game. And they're literally glued. And I said to one of the women, well, why don't you pass your husband? Just walk across the room. And she said, you want to get me killed? And I said, no, I just want to see what happens.
You have to wait till the commercial